Marketing for a real estate agent we often think of as advertising properties for sale. But marketing is the whole range of activities we undertake, not only to promote properties that are managed or listed for sale with us, but it's also all the activities that we undertake to promote our brand. It includes our logo, all our letterhead is part of marketing, everything that we produce that is branded. But it's also the way we answer the phone, the presentation of our office, the way we dress, the motor vehicles we drive and keeping them clean. All these things are part of our marketing. It's also, and we often don't think about it like this, it's also our contact management system. Sending Christmas cards to past buyers and sellers and to landlords and tenants, anniversary cards, all the things that we use like fridge calendars, promotional items, coffee cups, pens, key rings, all of this is part of marketing our brand. I think the key things to remember with marketing property is thinking about who the target market is for that particular property. Which demographic is likely to be your buyer? What are the wants, needs and fears of people in that demographic? Then write your advertising copy based around the wants, needs and fears of that particular demographic. Let me explain. If you listed a property and you thought that the most likely buyers for that sort of property are probably first home buyers, if you look at the fears of first home buyers is, will I be able to afford the mortgage payments? Will I have to do a lot of work to the property when I haven't got any money? If they've got small children, has it got a secure yard? The greatest fear for parents of young children is them running out in the road. So by looking at all these wants, needs and fears, we can tailor our copy so that it really hits the spot for our demographic. And it's very important. From a legislative point of view and making sure that we meet our legal obligations, we have to make sure that we don't misrepresent the property in any way. Now, there's a whole load of pitfalls here. The Competition and Consumer Act is federal legislation. It applies to us all. And in the legislation, it doesn't say that we have to set out to deliberately mislead somebody, but if our actions are likely to have misled somebody, then we're equally guilty. The other thing that many people might not be aware of is that under false and misleading advertising, which is not only written copy but the spoken word, oral representations, are what's known as acts of omission. So that's not revealing something to a potential buyer that you should have revealed. Now, the Office of Regulatory Services in the ACT has issued some guidelines regarding what they call stigmatised properties. So this might be properties where there's been a serious sexual assault, or perhaps a murder, or it might have been a house being used as a drug laboratory, or where there's likely to have been some sort of environmental contamination in proximity to the property. These things must be revealed to any potential purchaser. And in the guidelines that the Office of Regulatory Services have put out, they say if you are unsure, then get legal advice or contact ORS and get advice before you put the property to the market. So having a contract before you commence marketing residential property, and most people are aware that I can't commence marketing until I've got a copy of the contract in my possession. The legislation doesn't actually refer to a contract, it refers to the required documents. In the Civil Law Sale of Residential Property Act, it sets out a long list of what the required documents are that go into having a compliant contract. And it includes a very long list. So the initial intent of the legislation was that a potential buyer for a property could submit an offer to an agent, and were the offer acceptable to the owner, the buyer could sign the contract and secure the property, and therefore reduce the risk of being gazumped by another purchaser. What that means for the agent in terms of marketing is when the seller's solicitor delivers a contract to our office, we need to check that all the required documents are the correct ones for that property before we commence marketing. What happens with contracts being collated in a solicitor's office, sometimes the wrong pest report or the wrong certificate of title gets popped into a contract before it's sent out to the agent. If it's got the wrong documents in the contract, it's the same as not having a contract for marketing purposes. So every single contract that comes in, before we can commence marketing, we need to go through it, check it, make sure it's right. The other thing we need to be aware of is that the Agents Act says that it's an offence for us to commence marketing or to indicate that a property is coming up for sale or for auction at a future time until we've got the contract. So until we've got that contract in our possession, we can't indicate to people that it's coming onto the market. You know, we all know that when we've listed a property and we're waiting for a contract, we may come into contact with a buyer and we think, well, look, that's just what they're looking for. What we need to do is to say to them, look, I do have properties coming in all the time. If something comes in the very near future that's just what you're looking for, would you like to be the first to look at it? Yeah, bait advertising. The rules regarding bait advertising, again, set out in the Competition and Consumer Act. This is indicating that something might be available at a lower price than it's actually available for, or not having sufficient quantities of an item available at the lower price when you go to the market. Now, in the real estate scenario, the real estate profession, the area we're most likely to come unstuck with regards to bait advertising is with a multiple sale. So, for instance, if you're marketing all of the apartments in a new apartment block, or if you have listed for sale a land subdivision and you're offering multiple lots for sale. It's not good enough to say apartments from 345,000. If you've got some studio apartments at 345, some one-bedroom apartments for 400 and so on, you really need to set out what the price or price ranges are for each type of apartment that's in that development. And if it's a land subdivision, you can say blocks from 175 to 455,000 average price. Once you've sold the least expensive and there are none left, then you really need to change your advertising, and that would include billboards, advertising hoardings, for sale signs, websites, brochures. Everything's going to be changed. Categorically no. Yeah, you must not Photoshop your photographs. It's misleading and deceptive conduct. So you don't blue up the sky. There was a case that I was made aware of where an agent had photoshopped out some power lines that were in a picture of a view from the property, and yes, they were reprimanded. I'm always reluctant to discuss photoshopping other than to say don't do it. And I don't know whether the legislators would look at it on a case-by-case basis, or whether there's a blanket rule that says don't Photoshop. I think the safest option is don't Photoshop. If there's a particular, most of us use professional photographers nowadays, and they'll do a good job. If you're doing your own photography and there's a particular time of day when you know that property looks at its best, which is usually morning or evening, then simply make your appointment at that time. If you're doing internal photographs, take a workshop floodlight with you and light it up. In kitchens, put the range hood light on and the heat lights in the bathroom. Think like a photographer, and then you don't need to Photoshop. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really changed is social media. And there's a company in Perth that was doing it particularly well called Altitude Real Estate. And last time I looked, they had 9,000 people liked them on Facebook, which is quite phenomenal for a small company. Now, what that's done to build their profile, two things. I noticed that an English TV company had been to make a program about them, and quite recently I was listening to Radio National in the morning, and the principal or licensee of Altitude Real Estate was being interviewed as a real estate expert by Radio National. So, you know, this promotion or social media promotion can be very important for lifting our brand. The thing I noticed with Altitude, because I've been watching them now for 12 or 18 months, is that the growth in the numbers of likes that they get seems to me to be quite directly related to the amount of energy they're putting into their Facebook page. So when they slow down on posting, the numbers slow down. When they're consistently putting interesting things onto the Facebook page, the numbers grow. The other thing that is definitely worthy of consideration as a marketing tool is to create a blog. And as Australians, we seem to be perennially interested in the property market. I suspect that most of us see it as one of the safest places to put our money. And certainly a blog is a way to promote yourself and promote your brand. But also you can make money out of a blog. If you get enough people are following you, you know, you can have advertisers on your blog, and it's another income stream to be thought about. I think a key risk in terms of the client relationship is that the seller doesn't like the marketing you do. And so I think the tip there is always get your marketing materials approved by the seller before they actually go to print or go on the website. And that's the biggest risk. From the point of view of legislation, it's misleading and deceptive conduct. We also do need to remember that marketing is referring to our business. So we can't hold out that we are the number one agent in a suburb unless we can statistically prove it. If we're placing advertisements for individual agents because they've won an award, we need to set out really clearly, well, what was that award? Was it a National Real Estate Institute of Australia award, or was it just the internal quarterly Best Member of Staff award? We need to be clear about what that is. Those advertisements are designed to attract new clients and customers, and they need to be honest. I think the ads that say, you know, the number one agent and so on, I think they're the ones that scare me. Sometimes I see advertisements that are where the photography is particularly poor. If you cannot take a good photo, pay somebody to take a good photo. If you look at Canberra now, I saw this week that the median house price is $570,000. This is a deal of over $500,000 for most people. Surely they deserve a really good ad. The other tip, we would of course like to write the best ads we can for properties. The moment when you're the most enthusiastic about a property is just when you've listed it. And I would say when you've listed a property for sale, drive around the corner, away from the property, park the car and jot down the key enthusiasm points about the property. They'll form the basis of your advertising, and when you link that to the wants and needs of your likely target market, you've got the basis for some pretty good ad copy. I think for an individual misleading and deceptive conduct, it's $110,000 is the fine under the Competition Consumer Act. Although I see in the ORS guidelines they talk about 1.1 million when they're talking about stigmatised properties. So whichever way, they are pretty major fines.